Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Arizona Water for All Network's monthly webinar series. My name is Nieves. I am the Arizona WASH Program Specialist at Water for People. I work very closely with the Arizona Water for All Network to ensure that we have these kinds of avenues of connection. The network's overall goal is to help advance the knowledge of regional water challenges by fostering new collaborations and connecting people with resources. Together, we can contribute to stronger and lasting water solutions for all communities in Arizona. And so this goal is how the monthly webinar series came to be. It now happens every second Wednesday of the month, so welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is a casual virtual lunch chat, so feel free to eat your lunch as we listen in, drink your coffee, make sure you hydrate. I do believe that when we have space to eat together, I think that is when we can best learn from each other and can form very strong, lasting partnerships. So thank you for being here. Throughout our session, you will see links and resources that I will be putting in the chat so that you can stay involved and connected beyond the webinar. And so I'd also love for you to feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're tuning in from, and what about water is connecting you to the space. So with that, I'll introduce what we are to expect at this month's webinar. I think this is a very exciting one. We will have an alumni showcase where our guest speakers are previous participants of the Southern Arizona Water Leadership Institute, also known as WLI. We have with us Jonah Ivy, a fall 2024 alum, who will speak about their company, Transforming Terrain, which is a rainwater harvesting and arborist contracting company in Tucson. And they guide a variety of initiatives here in town, such as hosting a spring and fall land stewardship workshop series. They host apprenticeships through the NatureWorks program with Tucson Clean and Beautiful and the Pima flood control, as well as help managing the storm to shade assets with Tucson Water. So really cool stuff I'm excited to hear about. We also have Adeline Hegde from also the fall 2024 cohort. She'll be sharing how she came across the Water Leadership Institute program, some of her favorite experiences during and after the program, as well as discussing how WLI correlated and enhanced her prior academic endeavors while attending Arizona State University in Tempe, and how she plans to translate her learnings and water leadership skills in her newest academic ambitions at the University of Maine, where she will be pursuing her PhD in anthropology and environmental policy as an Indigenous science research assistant with her supervisor, Dr. Darren Ranco. And we also have with us Marcy Caballero Reynolds from fall 2025 WLI, a recent graduate from the University of Arizona, currently work with Watershed Management Group as a project manager focused on tree equity and cooling schools in Tucson and Phoenix. Marcy will walk us through who they are, how they got here, and what they do for Watershed Management Group. So very exciting to hear about where our alumni are going and how their experience at the Water Leadership Institute helped shape some of that. I'm going to give a brief overview on the Water Leadership Institute before handing off to our guest speakers, who will be presenting for about 10 to 12 minutes each, and that way we can ensure we have time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'll go ahead and kick us off with a very quick introduction to WLI. So what is the Water Leadership Institute? So across the world, frontline communities continue to face serious barriers to accessing safe, clean, and affordable drinking water, and they continue to be underrepresented in water decision making. The folks that helped make Water Leadership Institute come to be really do believe that local leaders understand their community's water challenges and the solutions needed to address them. So their voices should be guiding the decisions that affect their community's well-being. So to help meet this need, Environmental Defense Fund spearheaded the launch of the Water Leadership Institute in 2016 to create venues for learning, collaboration, and community building. So the mission really is to connect these frontline leaders with the skills, the knowledge, and the networks required to address these water challenges effectively. So through a focus on leadership development, water education, and collaboration, the WLI does aim to strengthen that community capacity to help cultivate confident, curious leaders who can advance these innovative and equitable water solutions. We really do acknowledge the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, RCAC, for its foundational role in creating the Water Leadership Institute about a decade ago. RCAC's Leadership Institute began in 2004 to help rural residents participate meaningfully in local decision making. And in 2013, this curriculum was adapted to create the first WLI in California through a partnership between RCAC, Self-Help Enterprises, and Environmental Defense Fund, as well as the Ford Leadership Institute and Western New Mexico University. So since then, the program has grown and scaled across the Western US, and we really do hope it can continue to adapt and reach community leaders across borders. The Water Leadership Institute in Southern Arizona is a localized collaborative effort between Environmental Defense Fund, Water for People, Reconciliación en el Río Santa Cruz, and the Arizona Water for All Network, in addition to so many local partners locally in Southern Arizona that helped bring the Institute to the region. This program reflects a shared commitment to supporting communities on their local water challenges through networks of support, skills sharing, and solutions through self-empowerment. This most recent cohort's leading question was, what is my relationship to water? And through that, we guided the participants through the four pillars of answering that question, making sure there was an understanding of the historical context, WASH pathways. WASH stands for water access, sanitation, and hygiene, transboundary resilience, and of course, how they define leadership and how can we expand the definition of leadership. This is a quick overview of what the most recent Water Leadership Institute looked like in Southern Arizona. Again, this was a collaborative effort between a variety of organizations, with the whole effort to recruit the next generation of water leaders in the area. The map on the left, the green map, shows the Colorado River, just to show why it is very important that we were focusing on the Western region when thinking about the Water Leadership Institute. Arizona has a big stretch of the Colorado River. It's also home to 22 federally recognized tribes, borderlands, a diversity of communities here, from ranchers, farmers, generational communities. And so this region was very important for us to bring the Water Leadership Institute. And our most recent session followed some locations across the Santa Cruz River. As you can see on the map in the middle, this is a map of the Santa Cruz River watershed. This river is transboundary. It goes through two countries and two tribal nations. And so it was very special to be able to have our participants journey across the Santa Cruz River, hearing from different leaders from a variety of sectors and helping them define, like, what is their water leadership journey, what is their story, and what is their relationship to water, so they can be confident stewards of the water challenges that they're facing here in their communities. It was very important for us to engage everyday people, so it wasn't required to have any prior knowledge about water. So really encouraging those first steps in being a water leader themselves. And most importantly, our participants explored how past decisions and actions have shaped the current conditions of the Santa Cruz watershed. And participants, they were guided through the realities of gaps in their communities, whether that was water access, sanitation, hygiene, what kind of stakeholders were present or not, and how can they be part of the solution for their communities. A lot of conversations on environmental justice and equitable water accessibility and security for their communities. And by the end of the sessions, participants reflected on their personal leadership style, their strengths, their relationships, and their interests. And they were able to identify ways to apply their learning to advocate for water solutions in their community. So I'm really excited to get to hear today where some of our alumni have taken these experiences, what they're doing now, and where they hope to go in the future, to really show that this is an avenue that is helping launch the next generation of water leaders, giving them the resources, or at least supporting the resources that they already have, the abundance of knowledge that they already hold, and getting to see the great things that they're doing out in the world. And these are just a few pictures of the most recent cohort with their certificates, getting to be out in the river, learning how to use different tools, hearing from different community leaders, and the importance of a holistic idea of what a leader can be. So that's my quick overview of what the Water Leadership Institute is, just to help folks get familiar with the program that we're discussing today. So with that, I will hand it off to our guest speakers. Jonah, would you like to go first? Not to call you out, but giving you the floor if you like.
I'm down. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Awesome. Thanks, Jonah. Go
Hey
ahead.
y'all, good to see some familiar faces again. Hey Addie, hey Marcy, hey others, hey Lynn. So yeah, I love this program. I thought it was really cool. Um, we are in a water crisis, I would say. So we really need to all know each other and be working together and like knowing what we're doing because at some point or another we're probably going to be working together. And it's really helpful to be able to know who you're supposed to reach out to, not have to go down that grapevine of trying to figure out who does what and who's already doing what. So I actually studied political philosophy in college, and I love politics, I love philosophy, I love economics, but I realized what I felt like there was a shortage of was people doing like the physical labor associated with land stewardship and water restoration. I felt like there was a gap there, and especially a gap like in uh, the mainstream like land management practices. That gap's still there. I think there's definitely a bunch of permaculture people out there. A lot of us probably know Brad Lancaster's books or some other books about hydrology or water restoration, but I think in general there's a gap. Like for example, there's a mandate that all new builds have to have gray water stub outs, but most of the gray water stub outs in these new developments are like 2, 3 feet underground and embedded in like a cement foundation. And if you know anything about gray water, it has most of the time it has to be gravity fed to a lower basin. So if it's 2, 3 feet under the ground, you basically can't use it. There's a lot of that kind of stuff going on where like the policy, the advocacy, that all was there, but then the people actually applying that stuff into the real infrastructure don't have that understanding or like maybe even an understanding of the purpose. So they feel like it's worth cutting the corners, even if they do understand the technical concept behind it. And so that's where I really jumped in with my company. And the goal long term with transforming terrain is to not just build like watershed restorative infrastructure, but also using the native plants, essentially create a food system for the next generation using native plants. And right now, people don't see that as a food system yet, but the goal is that one day we will be using this stuff as a food system, and building up a workforce that really understands that, a large workforce, not just a couple, 2, 3 employees, but hundreds of employees who feel like a camaraderie behind restoring the land, restoring our watersheds. So a couple of cool initiatives that I'm in that are kind of leading the industry and watershed restoration. One of them is the Storm the Shade program, which is briefly mentioned. Cool little story there. You might like this Tony being associated with law stuff. A lot of you might have heard Brad's story, so I'll be brief about it. But he used to just go in and cut those curves with a core drill in the middle of the night to capture rainwater. Now, I'm not promoting, doing illegal stuff and going against code. We love code for a lot of reasons because it keeps things consistent and predictable and helps us with maintenance and stuff like that. But now, this he did that, he proved that there was benefits to this kind of stuff, to capturing stormwater off the streets to bring it into the groundwater. Now the city pays for it. And Tucson is really at the forefront of that nationally. It comes out of our tax dollars. We voted it in so a number of years ago, like over a decade ago, and it funds a big portion of our work in our business to not just install this infrastructure, but maintain it. And so I think that there is a lot of different layers to making this initiative happen. Where now we're capturing a lot of the rainwater that falls in the city before it hits the drainage canals to be evaporated and washed away, creating erosion problems and flooding issues. There's policy advocacy, there was guerrilla gardeners, now there's expert installers and like contracting groups that understand this stuff. So that's a really great program. Since I don't have that much time, I'm going to just go by it, but look into that. It's called Storm the Shade. It's a state of the art, land stewardship initiative that's being run by the government, which is not common. Um, another initiative that I think is just super cool and very prevalent to WLI also because it's very young people that are in the program for the most part, is the NatureWorks program. And NatureWorks is a new initiative. It's essentially trying to bring together everybody who is in the water world to start talking together and working together on these initiatives, not just in Tucson, but in the whole like Southern Arizona region. So indigenous groups, county groups, foresters, and uh, really putting people into these little buckets like, hey, we're contractors and employers. Hey, we're policymakers, we're educators, and then putting all those people in the same room, but also connecting people within those micro groups. And a lot of stuff has been coming out of that NatureWorks initiative, which is the specific one that I'm really involved in is their apprenticeship program. And so they connect apprentices who apply for the program with a bunch of employers and essentially employers to train up the job force and change the mainstream practices around land management to make it more sustainable. So connecting, apprentices with nursery growers who grow native plants and how to germinate those seeds and harvest them, how to, I have an apprentice and I teach a portion of the program and I'm teaching them on erosion control, flood mitigation, and like rainwater harvesting on a commercial scale. And and then a lot of times those seems like those apprentices are getting filtered into actual paid positions that are, career paths. And it's really cool because it's actually paid. The apprentices go through a 6-month program and it's 3 months paid education, 3 months paid internship, which is like really rare to get paid to learn and learn at that caliber for 6 months from the people who are, some of the best in the industry. So super cool initiative that's going on in our area, NatureWorks, and I'm an educator and a contractor in that group. And and then I don't know if I really want to touch too much on the classes I host. I think they're pretty cool. Uh, I've been doing these workshops for a few years now, and what inspired me actually was when I worked at Watershed Management Group, which is where a few people here work. There was a build your own basin program. I think you guys still have it. When I was there, I was kind of spearheading a neighborhood leader initiative for that, and where we teach neighborhood leaders how to teach the program, and they teach the class to their neighbors. And it had a lot of success. I've been doing a lot of stuff like that on my own since I started my own business. And we do workshop series mostly on rainwater harvesting, but gray water, native plant identification, proper arborist techniques, and like native foods and stuff like that. And we host these workshops through the spring and fall. And it's really beautiful what's been coming of it. I have like over 200 people on my workshop list, and most of the people are repeats. They keep coming back because they're inspired by the work we do. And it just feels so good to have something you believe in, feel like you're creating a real impact in the world, not just hear all this doom and gloom, and then also get real skills in the process. The key there, if you're interested in doing this for your own neighborhood, is you got to have food. Food's got to be free. It's got to be free, and there's got to be free food. If you have free food, people will come and learn just about anything. So, but that's been really successful for me. And now I'm very potentially going to be doing that contracted through the city of Tucson now and actually building out programs like that in neighborhoods so they can manage the public assets instead of the city managing it as a way to reduce costs. Oh, thanks everyone. Cute. As a way of essentially managing public assets instead of like paying contractors to do it, letting the community take initiative on, feeling like they have an impact that's positive in the world. It really actually is super positive. So those are some initiatives I'm involved in. And I did want to point out one more thing specifically because Tony said in the beginning that you're interested in like indigenous environmental resiliency initiatives. Um, some year back in 2024, I installed a big uh, basically living lab for the Tohono Community College. And the idea was for it to be an outdoor classroom for rainwater harvesting, native plant identification and use, indigenous cultural practices and prayers and ceremonies. And I don't know what your program is involved in, but they have been wanting a second round of funding to essentially expand that project. I was the original installer for it. Now I have connections of indigenous contractors who could actually be the installers instead of me. But at the time, I was the only person who had the right like insurance and licensure to do it. But that's a really cool initiative where like TOCCs is like putting the traditional knowledge type of learning format there while still trying to stay within like the academic framework. So it's pretty cool. Definitely some connections there that you can make. Teresa Newberry would be the person to reach out to. You're on mute, but I'll type it in the chat too.
That Kit's the last name. Thank you for that.
Yeah, totally. But cool. I think I had a little 12-minute timer. I don't know if that's actually how long I have, but just went off. So I think I hit the mark. Anyway, happy to answer questions if anyone has anything or pass the mic.
Thank you so much. If you have any links, like of some of the things you mentioned, I pulled a few as you were speaking and dropped them in the chat, but feel free to share any links and resources, especially for NatureWorks. I wasn't sure if I had found the right one, so if you know which one is the correct one, and if you have more information about the Living Lab at TOCC, which I have heard about, super cool. Let's keep that conversation going. I also know a few folks at TOCC. That I think it would be really cool to just make sure those projects keep going. So Jonah, thank you so much. I'm gonna pass the mic. If you could stay on for the remainder, that way we can have Q&A at the end because I'm sure there are more questions for you. So thanks so much, Jonah. I'll be passing it on to Addie. Are you feeling good to go?
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of context as to when I started the program, I was in my second to last semester of my Master's of Sustainability Solutions degree with a concentration or focus area on Indigenous-led sustainability solutions. But I also was simultaneously a graduate research assistant with Impact Water Arizona, and that's like a pillar or a branch out of the Arizona Water Innovation Initiative. So I already was really in the realm of water work and water through community knowledge and utilizing the community power and resources that kind of already existed within these spaces and how to harness them, activate them, and really empower communities to be able to take their water circumstances into their own hands. So I initially had just kind of found out about this because of being within the Arizona Water Innovation Initiative Network. And when I had found out about it, I'm not originally from Arizona, and so I just really wanted to familiarize myself with the ecological and hydrological systems that were in Arizona, as well as familiarizing myself with those components of Arizona through community lenses and how community-based knowledge in those fields or spaces was valuable and also specifically intimate to the lands and the places and spaces that we were at. So even though I was based in Tempe or Phoenix, the Phoenix area, I loved going down to the South Tucson cohort for our meetings. And honestly, I think that the ways that the program impacted me personally and also professionally, I would say personally, my leadership identity, if you will, and also just shaping the ways in which I understood leadership and also viewed it, changed significantly through the program. So I felt that that was a really big component of it for me. But I also think that just the network and connections and communities that we made through being in the cohort. So, also expanding my understanding or my definitions of what leadership looked like by listening to my cohort members and just, collaborating with them over the course of the program's curriculum, but also being able to tap into those networks even after the program was done. So actually transforming terrain. So I was able to get in contact with Jonah one time, or not one time, but a few times for a particular project I had at the end of my master's degree in the spring of 2025 for a capstone, and just being able to, tap into those networks for expertise on sustainable landscaping or what that would look like with indigenous plants and the water basin or the just the different techniques that would be maybe most beneficial whenever we were recommending some different design recommendations. But anyways, I think that that's just like a really great example of how the cohort network and community expanded beyond just the one semester that we were there together. And also just the numerous alumni reconnective activities and events that we're able to also kind of keep in touch and keep base with each other. So, eh, going back though to some of the teachings that were from the program itself that I found were really valuable, I would say, that sometimes the person presenting, they're not necessarily the only leader there, that everybody has innate leadership within themselves. And so kind of tapping into those individual strengths and capacities that each person has can really harness the leadership or the strengths that are presented within that group or that, project's abilities. So that definitely shaped my personal definition of leadership as well. And also just really looking at how community resources and community power comes into play within leadership. So one thing that I did really love, the program was heavily centered around Indigenous knowledge systems and values. And as that was my concentration in my master's degree, and my research assistantship position, I felt that, this program it was a great fit. So also seeing that really held as a value throughout the entirety of the program was incredible and really great just for building knowledge and understanding on my part as somebody who had moved from out of state. So I certainly will take a lot of those notes and principles and ways of connecting and learning about community with me moving forward wherever I am. So I'm pursuing my PhD at the University of Maine, and I am pursuing it in anthropology and environmental policy. And my supervisor is Dr. Darren Ranko, which I'm really excited about. So we'll hopefully be working with community science and community oriented engagement and based studies with the Wabanaki Nation. So the Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, Abenaki, Micmac, and Maliset. So I'm really excited to, begin building those relationships of trust. So, one of the things that we had learned in this leadership program was that building relationships of trust, it's all about asking before offering. And so, it's small things like that, little nuggets and tokens that, you kind of take into your next projects and seeing how Indigenous stewardship and leadership within the water realm, but also just in general, kind of has manifested within such a um, prominent Indigenous presence of a community like in Arizona, and how a lot of those best practices can carry forward in other places as well. Um, but I also think that some of the curriculum that we learned about in terms of relation to place and um, what our relationships are to water and place and the original stewards, I think that that heavily influenced my PhD process in terms of what I was looking for and what I felt would fit best. So, one of my things when applying and researching what would be best, it was a big necessity that from the get-go, all of my research endeavors or my pursuits for what my dissertation may or may not look like had to have decolonial values at its root. And I was not really willing to budge on that, but I'm really grateful that I found such an excellent match and somebody and a program that's willing to work with me throughout the process in order to ensure that relationship to place and those places stewards are all encompassed and prioritized throughout the process. And yeah, so I think that overall the program was an excellent experience for me to be able to practice and tap into some of those components, but also being able to recall upon network and community and other cohort members, even after the program had finished. But yeah, I think that that's about all that I have. But, if there are any other questions or I can just, pass the mic as well. But yeah, it really is just starting up my next phase of my academic career pursuits. So I'll just take all the learnings that I had with me for sure.
Thanks so much, Addie, and congratulations on your next academic chapter. That is awesome. And I'm really inspired to hear how much being a participant of the Institute helped guide your decision and the kind of work that you wanted to do in your studies. So thanks so much for sharing about your leadership journey and what's next for you. We'll save questions for the end if that's okay with you, if you can hang out. And we'll go ahead and pass the mic to Marcy.
Thank you. And it's good to see other people that I see in the field. Hi, Jonah. It's good to see you again. I made a presentation, so let me share that really quick. I wasn't sure if we were supposed to or not, but let me get this on the screen. Okay, great. So just a quick intro. Nieves already introduced who I am. My name is Marcy. My pronouns are they, them. Currently, I work for Watershed Management Group as a community conservation education and impact project manager. It is an extremely long title. And I just finished graduate school in May for urban planning at the University of Arizona. I was just going to go through a quick background of who I am. I'm a very creative person when it comes down to it. My background is originally in art, and then that led to me joining AmeriCorps for a while to get an education award to go back to school. And that led to going back for natural resource management, which then has led me to working in multiple nonprofits here in Tucson, Arizona. And everything through that time has been rooted in environmental justice. And specifically also diversifying the environmental field. Currently, I am a project manager at WMG. I also work at a heat resilience lab at the University of Arizona, where we look at city plans from cities in Arizona and see how their goals for heat resilience are either up to code or not, or how they can improve how cities will mitigate heat in the future. And then I'm also just involved in a couple city Tucson initiatives. And so I want to go into why I joined the Water Leadership Institute. I think since going back into school, I was trying to find a space where water and heat intersected. In my mind, I was always thinking that water and heat were separate entities, but they're actually very intertwined. The heat crisis that we're in right now, they're not separate problems. They actually go hand in hand. And so this was an opportunity to talk about water issues that I wasn't aware of as a student throughout Southern Arizona. And for me, it was also the fact that this was a very community-centered program. I think a lot of the work I do and the spaces I enter are a lot of BIPOC areas and neighborhoods. And as mentioned before, this is based, and going into these spaces is building trust before coming in and saying, we're going to do this. It's understanding who is there, what's the impact, and how can we help in a process. And I think one of the things I loved about WLI is it was one of the first safest spaces I felt being in, because the cohort was just so diverse. And I've never been in a water-centric space where there's so many other people that I felt connected with. And then lastly, it was an opportunity to understand how these intersecting networks, how intersecting personalities, people from all different walks of life come together, because we all have a shared common goal of trying to understand water and how we can care for the Sonoran Desert and beyond. So it was a lot about building connections. So there was a picture of our cohort last fall. I think there were 38 participants, and we traveled throughout the Santa Cruz watershed. I think the best part, and something that a lot of organizations that do this type of work don't do, is they compensated us for our time, which honestly is very hard to find. And I think that was a huge benefit for folks, especially folks that worked on the weekends or folks that were going to school. I think it helped us show up. But it was also just who was teaching us and what we were learning throughout the, I think it was October to December experience. So we did a lot of field visits. We went to Patagonia, Nogales, Santa Cruz, and different Santa Cruz River sites. It was a mixture of like being in the field, taking notes, putting data into documents, and also just listening and sharing our knowledge with one another. And then at the end, we all created this really cool zine that is actually, it's a very beautiful booklet that I've been sharing with my friends. So what WI has taught me that I bring into my work right now is that leadership is relational. I think leadership can be very top down, but it's actually who you know and how do you share knowledge between people. Equity is structural. That means we're designing and talking and learning from folks that are being the most impacted, and then they're always going to be at the table. There's a very transparent process, and this is something that we do at Watershed Management Group. And currently also green infrastructure is water infrastructure. So a lot of the things that we also install are rain basins, and I'm going to go into that into my next slide, which is what I do mainly in Phoenix and Tucson. So I run the programs for Canopy for Kids and Grow Tucson for Watershed Management Group. And those are two massive school initiatives that are putting trees into our most vulnerable areas in Phoenix and in Tucson. So in Tucson, we are working in Thrive in the O5, we're working in Sunnyside, and it's actually the students that are helping design what they want to be implemented in these schools. For Canopy for Kids, this is in Phoenix. For the year 25 to 26, we had almost 4,000 students involved. We trained 29 teachers, and we also compensate the teachers for the training because they learn what water harvesting practices are, why we want to plant native plants, how we want to treat wastewater and floodwater, and why it's important to understand the flow and where our water comes from. And then we also do rain garden education. And I also kind of mentioned what I do for my heat resilience research, which is evaluating city plans, but with an equity lens. This is just a couple slides that I got from my Canopy for Kids presentations that I've done for other places, but it's a huge partnership. And we work with ASU, we work with the city of Phoenix, EcoRise, and WMG. And these are just some pictures of how we've engaged communities. It's a lot of families coming out, not just the kids. And so there's a lot of intergenerational knowledge that is being shared. We're actually listening to grandparents come out who talk about plants that they've planted and how they take care of them. And then we've also taken that information and put it in our curriculum. So we're trying to do a thing where it's not just top-down leadership and education, it's all of us learning together. This is just a quote that one of the kids said at one of the schools is, "The future is built by those willing to create it." I was like, wow, I had never said anything like that when I was in 5th grade. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have been focusing on in work. I'm going to stop sharing right now. And I think one thing I didn't mention is this kind of happened to me the last couple of months. I've been applying for this grant to create have an initiative where the Santa Cruz River will have like a float parade. And I think a part of this was due to just like what we did for WLI. And so what this would really look like is just having people celebrate the Santa Cruz River by having some sort of parade that's very creative, people making dragonflies, bringing in festivities. And I know other places in the US have done this specifically for specific creatures that they're trying to conserve. And I'm like, why can't we do something like this during our Santa Cruz River restoration days? But yeah, I think now on the side, my focus is being focused on the artistic aspect and how can you share this knowledge in a way that is very visual and that people can interact with. But yeah, that's all I wanted to present. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Thank you for highlighting the importance of heat and water. I think that is something that I need to learn more about. So this was my catapult to learning about that. So thank you for dedicating so much of your time after WLI to make sure that bridge is solidified in the work that we're seeing in our communities and highlighting the importance of the art as well. Art, I think for the Water Leadership Institute was something very important to integrate to show that that is a way to tell your story, but also to engage the everyday leader. There, everyone has a story to share. Art is definitely a way to share that and to be a leader. So I'm looking forward to future projects as well, and hopefully we can all work together on helping make a lot of these projects and dreams that not just yourself, but so many of the WLI alumni here in this room and not here in this room, that they get so inspired. And I think one of our biggest goals in the Water Leadership Institute is supporting the alumni beyond participation in the program. It's how can we support them after this? How can we provide funding or grants to help with these projects? How can we collaborate? And I think funding is always the biggest question mark for a lot of us and the work that we do. So if we can all pull our strengths together, pull our resources together, I feel like we can make a lot of sustainable change and to support the alumni. I just want to say that again, like that is our big goal. So if anyone has ideas to support us or like help support the alumni, please reach out. But with that, I want to make sure that there's time for Q&A for our guest speakers who are amazing. I'm going to mute myself because I can keep yapping. So feel free to unmute yourself, put in the comments, ask questions for our great guest speakers. Thank you all so much.
I joined the float. It sounds like a great idea. You should. You probably already working with Kat, but I feel like Kat's acumen would be all over that.
Man, imagine all the alumni coming together to make this float happen or this parade. Man, that's exciting.
It could happen. I feel like there's a lot of creative people in Tucson that would be like, oh, we just need, I feel like it's one of these things where someone just needs to start it and then the energy builds. And I
Mm,
think during a time when also funding is cut in so many different ways, it's like, where do we put this energy and like,
yeah.
what are those spaces in which people can collaborate? And I think it's important to have things like this because it provides spaces for people to be like, oh, this is an idea I have. Who here wants to talk about it? So I will be attending these more often.
Yay. That's the goal, collaboration.
On that note, my question will be for the three of you, what ideas do you have in terms of how you would like to continue to work together, to have the WLI to continue to engage, and how us as the Arizona Water for All network can support you?
I think one thing that we're doing for Watershed Management Group is we're going to have 8 new apprentices that start in the fall, and a lot of them are based on river restoration. 2 of the apprentices are here joining today, Liam and Esther. And I think one of the things is having WLI come out and do presentations for all these programs that we've mentioned. Jonah also mentioned an apprenticeship. And I think having a space where people can learn about what is this thing that you can do on the weekends and learn about other people who are interested in this work would be super beneficial for those apprentices.
I think just keep on coming out and going to all the that stuff like Marcy's saying. I feel like when you know someone's face, it just feels the community just feels so much stronger when all the faces know all the faces. You know, not even if you don't know names, like just like being like, oh yeah, you came out before, I recognize you. It really does make a huge difference in like a community's ability to get together and make it happen, the change we need.
Yeah, and I think just being able to also hop online for different sessions like this to talk and bounce ideas off of each other is a great way to kind of continue the connections and momentum that we have been able to develop through the program. But also I know that, for myself at least, like I'm not necessarily going to be super close for any in-person events at the moment, but any online things, I love the opportunities to be able to put in some ideas or brainstorm. I know we had a couple of brainstorming sessions about a month ago or something. I was in a weird time zone situation, so I was not able to attend. But if it wasn't like 2 a.m., I totally would have. And just different things like that that I think are great ways to continue to maintain those relationships and connections and networks.
Hi everyone. It's so great to see you all again. Great, great work. It's so cool to hear what y'all have been up to. I'm just like blown away by like how amazing y'all are and like this work is. It's really, really motivating me and making me very excited. So thank you. Thank you for sharing and taking time out of your day today. I wanted to ask y'all in the last year or two since I known y'all and y'all have been a part of the Water Leadership Institute program, what's something you've learned about yourself in your leadership journey? Like something, yeah, something you've learned about leadership or like kind of a takeaway you've had since the program and where you're at now, because y'all have done such amazing things. Like what have you learned through this process?
Like just right off the bat, what comes to mind is like the value of maintenance in like
Mhm.
those relationships or sort of like upkeep, touching base, And, you know, that is something that we can do through either webinars or different meetings, but also, calling in on some of those networks and things and how that contributes to your role as a leader and being able to kind of maintain and continuously steward those relationships. So it's not just like a time limited relationship, but it can be something that grows and faces and things like that. But yeah, I think maintenance is something that really resonates with me for something that I learned about myself and leadership styles and as it grows and develops, what's something I really value.
That's cool. I feel like that relates really well to Marcy's point about leadership being relational, and all that kind of maybe behind the scenes energy that goes into being a leader that people don't always see. That's really cool. I love that.
I think for me, I learned how accessibility is so important when it comes to learning and to teaching. The fact that we were able to collectively all get on buses that would take us to places that we wouldn't necessarily be able to get to via our own vehicles, or even if you had one, has kind of taught me like we can't expect people to come to us all the time. And if we can make it accessible for communities to attend these conversations, it also means that we have to go to them. And sometimes that can be difficult, that can be more expensive, but that is also how you build that relationship is you have to be able to make these spaces accessible for people to have voices.
I like that. I like these comments. Uh, yeah, I've been so focused on my own stuff for too long, and it's been I think needing to get out to other people's things, and that kind of goes into what Marcy's saying too, like not just expecting people to come, but like going to other places and not necessarily as a leader, but just as a community member, because all of us are leaders, and we become a leader like of our own life. Uh, and just that just goes with you everywhere you go, whether you're in a leadership role or not. And I guess I've also just realized that leadership is more of an action than a role. And a lot of times it's seen as a role because people get put into positions and whatnot. But it's really more of an action. And being a good leader is knowing when to take that action versus let other people take it. And that's how you really make a community rise to the occasion rather than you trying just step up yourself. So that's been really good for me to try and embody.
I'm so inspired and very appreciative of all of you for again taking time out of your day to come talk about your experience in the Water Leadership Institute and your water leader journey before, during, and after the Institute. It goes to show how important it is to have the Water Leadership Institute and to make sure it can continue to happen. And most importantly, to continue to engage the alumni, continue supporting all of you and the really great things that you're doing. Thank you for making a difference in our communities, in your community, and continuing to develop and write your water leadership story. That is all the time that we have for today. I know we're at the hour mark. I feel like I could keep talking to y'all for like a lot more hours, but I'll save that for another time, hopefully at an alumni gathering or engagement event. Let's stay in touch. I hope that there are some new connections formed here so we can all, again, work together to create a stronger region when we're facing our very unique water challenges, working together, creating leaders, and not just creating them, but allowing people to identify as a leader because you are a leader. Just being who you are and having the resources to get your project out or your story out. So thank you so much to our guest speakers. Thank you for coming to our Alumni Showcase. I look forward to seeing y'all next month, and maybe we can have another showcase as we get more participants on board. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you on next time. Bye.